ladies and gentlemen, 大家晚安 is in Taiwanese way. 大家晚安 Welcome to SOPA Award for Editorial Excellence 2025. Tonight we gather together not just to celebrate our outstanding work, but to reaffirm that the vital role of the journalism across this region. For over a quarter of a century, the SOPA Awards, I think, have stood as the highest recognition for excellence in Asia-Pacific journalism. We honor our courage, integrity, and the pursuit of truth. Also, we honor the journalists who give the spotlight to the people in the shadow, hold power to account, and amplify the voice unheard. This year, we received a total of 714 entries submitted in English, Chinese, and Bahasa Indonesia. We are particularly happy to see the increasing submission from regional and local publication. A total of 22 entries received our subsidy to small media companies and the first-time entrants. It's good for SOPA to become more inclusive. The topics of this year, I think, are very diverse and dynamic, not only about China. A story about South Asia, East South Asia, and Japan. Martial law in South Korea all become the global headline. The market, to make this award and tonight possible, we are grateful. Thanks for 120 dedicated volunteer judge. Volunteer means no pay, including me. One long-standing awards administration, I would like to thank you, team again, for your, I think, the over 50 years cooperation as SOPA. 15 years. No matter what kind of situation in Hong Kong, we still have a good support from Hong Kong U. And our sponsors, supporting partners, and the members. Tonight, we will recognize about 100 winners in 21 categories. Congratulations to all winners in advance. Now, my final part. I just have 3 minutes. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mishal Husain. I think Mishal Husain is a person we don't need to introduce too much. I just want to update her current situation. Mishal is the editor-at-large for Bloomberg Weekend, where she is set to launch a new multi-platform interview show later this year. But, salary is not paid without work. So right now, she, at the end of the show, she already has a weekend interview running every week in digital print for Bloomberg subscription and the terminal users already. Her global perspective was forged as a correspondent based in Washington and in Singapore, and through reporting in every critical moment, including from New York after 9/11, in Washington at the start of the Iraq War, to Beijing for Olympics, and also in Pakistan after Bin Laden's death. She was the first journalist inside the Pakistan school attacked by the Taliban. I think as an interviewer, she is renowned for his influential conversation, no matter who she interviewed. From Aung San Suu Kyi to her exclusive interview with the Prince Harry and his wife, Meghan. I'm curious about that. Her excellence is most recently recognized with the Charles Wheeler Awards for outstanding contribution to journalism. She's also the author of the Sunday Times bestseller, Broken Threads, a powerful memory, a family memory from the empire to independence. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to give a very warm SOPA welcome to Mishal Husain. In Chinese way, 让我们欢迎 Mishal Husain.
good evening, everyone. Fellow journalists, editors, friends, colleagues, all those with whom I share a vocation and a journey in this industry. Thank you for asking me here, SOPA. It is such a privilege to be before you, just as I begin a new stage of my professional life, and one that gives me the opportunity again to seek out stories from across the globe. I am a little unused to a stage like this, given that most of my work is behind the microphone or in the TV studio. Sometimes, though, those worlds come together. And exactly a year ago, in the final days of the UK election, I was on a stage with the last British Prime Minister and the present one for a primetime TV debate. In the hours before, the police came to see me in my dressing room and said they wanted to talk through what would happen if there was a threat or disruption that took us off air. We would clear the stage, they told me, and we wanted to introduce you to the officer who would be removing you from the stage so that you're not alarmed when he carries you off at speed. And I thought there was something rather endearing, possibly very British, in the idea that being introduced beforehand to the man that I might next see barreling towards me would mean I wasn't alarmed. Thankfully, we never had to put that to the test. Here we are halfway through 2025, and while quiet periods are few and far between for most newsrooms, these last few months have been particularly charged. Our profession is working on an ever greater number of fronts, weighing up the immediate as well as the long-term consequences of everything from executive orders to missile strikes. It is what we chose to do, and we must embrace and move with the technology of our time as well as the news of our time. I do, however, think that this technological moment is a pivotal one, which is why I wanted to take a few minutes to reflect on the personal dimension of the AI age, the use and abuse of image and voice. I am really thinking here about the challenge it poses to trust, which is probably the key value that has underpinned my work in media over more than 25 years. I went into this profession because I trusted in the power of journalists to relay what they see, to share the new, the different, the intriguing, the questionable, the wrong. The first news story I remember hearing about was Cambodia, about 1979. My parents told me, as parents do, to eat up my food because of the famine in Cambodia. I was 6, but this word Cambodia stuck in my mind. About 10 years later, I read about Year Zero and the killing fields, and I understood why my parents were thinking about and horrified by what they heard of Cambodia, despite living thousands of miles away in the United Arab Emirates. When I became a journalist, I felt the trust placed in me from the very beginning in the junior-most roles, as my editors rightly expected clarity, accuracy, and speed. My first job was writing the text that appears on screen at the then very new Bloomberg TV. I must have been reasonably okay at it because other opportunities followed, including my first on-camera appearance in a tiny self-operated booth in Bloomberg, London. This was the 90s, the last century, I have to admit, moving the autocue on with my hand on a dial that was only just out of shot. Later at the BBC, I felt the trust placed in me by interviewees. Would I listen properly? Would I have done enough preparation in advance? Would I ask informed questions? I have also felt the tension, the added edge, the atmosphere of peril in these encounters when they take place at high-stakes moments, such as referendums or elections. When the prize is the acquisition or the retention of power, the interviewees or their people will let you have it if they perceive you, rightly or wrongly, to have been unfair. And yet, as I say this, the interview that sticks in my mind is one with a serving British Prime Minister, which was testy. At the end of it, however, we both stood up, shook hands, thanked each other, and said, "See you next time." I'm not naming this particular Prime Minister as I don't want to give them too much credit. And as the UK is on its 6th Prime Minister of the last 10 years, I don't think that they're identifiable. But I am aware of the privilege of that type of post-interview exchange. In so many countries, in contrast, there are firm and real consequences for journalists and others based on their words. You know this reality in Hong Kong. Many of you will have felt the sharp end of this elsewhere in the region and the world, including the United States, where a young woman was recently detained by masked immigration agents after writing an op-ed. And the wider picture for journalist safety is stark. The Committee to Protect Journalists says 2024 was the worst year since it began collecting data 3 decades ago. At least 124 journalists and media workers were killed, nearly 2/3 of them Palestinians killed by Israel. The changing tools of our trade fit into this landscape. And let me say a little here about the ways that Bloomberg is using AI. News stories on the Bloomberg terminal now have 3 bullet points at the top, distilling the information that follows, and they're labeled as Summary by Bloomberg AI. The same feature is labeled Takeaways by Bloomberg AI in stories on our website. This use of generative AI began last year, and it's continuously being refined. It saves readers and users time. It is popular and appreciated. There is editorial oversight, and it complements the journalism that follows. It cannot exist without it. Like many of you, we also have stories that have been enhanced or made possible by the use of AI and data visualization. There was one recently from New York analyzing 75,000 cars in footage from Manhattan to work out if congestion charging was deterring lower income drivers, i.e. those in less fancy cars, from coming into the city. It turned out it wasn't. Similarly, AI has been part of a mapping of tent cities within Gaza and was used to back up reporting from Singapore about ship-to-ship transfers of Iranian oil in the Strait of Malacca. These are examples of the human and artificial coming together, of moving with the times. It would be impossible to have human beings produce summaries for the thousands of Bloomberg stories published every day, and nor is it the kind of work that most of us came into this industry dreaming that we would do. As an interviewer, I have, of course, thought about how to use AI for research or indeed questions. But I don't believe that my ultimate goal of insightful, long-form conversation will be reached through ChatGPT or similar avenues. That's not to say they can't be of use. Last month, I interviewed Elon Musk. It was an experience. I did consult his own AI tool, Grok, beforehand because I was intrigued about what it might say about him. I asked, what is Elon Musk's greatest challenge right now? And Grok gave me a good answer about multiple challenges of business and government. He was still with Doge at the time. And about the challenge of scrutiny, new stakeholders and pressures. I did use that question in the interview with attribution, telling Elon Musk I had consulted Grok, and did he agree with its assessment? The interview had a big reaction, and afterwards I saw that one of Elon's many millions of followers on X also consulted Grok. Dear Grok, he wrote, what happened? And who is Mishal Husain? Grok replied, Musk was confrontational, calling Hussein an NPC, and yes, I had to look this up afterwards. Grok went on to say, evidence indicates she conducted a standard interview with tension due to Musk's actions. So I do have faith in aspects of this new world. There is, however, a part of it that sends a chill through me. Shortly after it was announced last November that I was joining Bloomberg, my mother forwarded me a video on WhatsApp. It was a version of a news report about my move. The pictures were of TV studios with a series of female anchors. If you looked closely and thought about it, you would realize they were AI generated. These women did not look like me. Their faces were pretty blank. The graphics, the straps on screen were all meaningless. The voiceover was also AI, and the script was pretty generic, banal. The words, interestingly, were not inaccurate, and there was nothing in it that you could feel outraged about it. Instead, I would describe it as creepy, an artificial world into which a real person's career had been sprinkled. A video supposedly about me, but populated by journalists conjured out of thin air. There was something empty and soulless about it. Even then, I will take that use of AI any day over what I now see regularly on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X. These are the deepfakes of respected broadcasters, journalists, economists, including colleagues of mine, past and present, where they ask you to join their investor WhatsApp group, set up so that you can benefit from their years of experience analyzing the market, the economy, and our complex world. There are many real-world examples of people being scammed out of their entire life savings by the individuals and groups behind this trickery and crime. Often those whose image is used are the most credible, the most trusted, known to be faces and voices upon whom you rely. Of course, the scammers make their choice this way. They are not stupid. Hence, it seems the harder you have worked to secure your reputation as one of journalistic integrity, the more likely it is that your name and image will be abused in this way to inflict hardship on others. What is the answer? You're no doubt thinking. Well, of course, I'd want it to be impossible for such material to be online, but that seems an impossible wish given the continued prevalence of harmful material of many kinds online. Therefore, I think we probably, sadly, have to live with it, the idea that our faces and our reputations can be used to rob people. But on the broader landscape of what AI means for us personally and professionally, I will leave you with this. Perhaps the only lesson we can take away is to be ever more human, to put enough depth and richness of knowledge into our work, to display and to embody spirit, empathy, humor, to deploy curiosity and challenge, to have courage, to remember why we were attracted to the media in the first place, to endeavor to be one step ahead of Grok and the others. They will learn from, indeed scrape our work every second of every day. But we are still here, and we too can and will keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mishal. We are just going to stand over here for a moment while we reset our stage for the Q&A. And by the way, you could never be an NPC. That's just not possible. Okay, just a reminder for everyone in the audience, if you do have a question that you would like to ask Mishal, please just go to Slido and you can enter your question there, and hopefully we will have time to cover it. But I want to start off first. Mishal, thank you so much for that speech. I think your reminder at the end that we are human and being human is a huge advantage, is really important. One thing that I think is really interesting now is that as people tell us all over the world, most people now get their news from those channels you just mentioned, TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. And there's a lot of criticism of legacy media and the mainstream media. So how do you think we can maintain and continue to build trust with audiences so that they do still want to read all the publications who are here in this room?
Well, even within that landscape of news from social media, there's been a big shift in the last 10 years. There was a time when people would say, I saw this on Facebook, but what they had actually seen was a BBC piece or a CNN piece. Now, as I think Reuters are here, right? I think Reuters' recent news consumption survey and the data in that showed us, evidenced what we already see, was that it's much more fragmented than that. It is people getting their news from TikTokers and from influencers and podcasters. There are many different kinds of podcasters, but it is just a much more fragmented landscape. And I think that perhaps one of the things we can do to regain, in some cases, or maintain and engender trust is to be more transparent and show our workings more. And I will give you this example. Some of it actually means, in some ways, we're going to have to put ourselves forward as journalists more, blow our own trumpets more. But there is a way to do it that I think is still quite natural to and within our journalistic values. And I'll give you this example. There's a film that's been made recently in India called Homebound. And it is based on a piece that was in the New York Times in 2020. It's written by Basharat Peer, who worked on the New York Times opinion pages. And he saw a picture on X in that great trek that millions of Indians were having to do during the COVID period, when people were going back to their villages on foot, thousands of miles. And he saw this picture of two men, one essentially almost having to carry the other because he was sick. And he wanted to know the story behind this piece. And first he thought, I'll commission someone, and he ended up writing it himself. And it was only because of the film that I read Basharat's piece all about the story behind his piece. And I thought, we need to tell more of these stories. We need to be upfront. What led me? How long did I work on that investigative piece? What were the... And obviously, we need to protect sources. And you don't want to give everything away. And ultimately, most of us, almost all of us, would put our subject and our interviewees and our topic first. But I think there is more that we need to do to show people why we followed a story and how we followed a story, because the more they know, again, it shows there's a real person behind this, a real journalist, a team, an organization that committed to this. So that's the kind of thing I think we all need to do more of.
Now, you spoke quite a bit about AI, which, of course, we are all trying to understand and trying to use in a positive way. We do have a question from the audience. If you were starting your career now at the advent of widespread AI usage, how would you think differently about your career and the skills you need to succeed as a journalist? And I'm thinking of all the journalism educators and journalism students who are graduating into this totally different world.
Yeah, I don't know if I would think differently about the career ahead, or think differently about, I think the core skills, the curiosity, the courage, the commitment, those remain the same. And on the use of tools, like, of course, a younger generation, these are, to them, native skills, whereas for my generation, they're acquired skills. But I am extremely interested in apps like ChatGPT and the others as an organizational tool, and to some extent as a research tool. I mean, when I do a long form interview, I might have 20 pages of articles and thoughts to think about, and however I'm going to organize and distill them is incredibly important to the final product, not least because I need the methods that are going to imprint them into my brain and my memory as much as possible. But on the use for questions and research, I'm going to give you another example from the Elon Musk interview, which is that my research was not done through ChatGPT or anything like that. I talked to many Bloomberg colleagues, because there are people who cover Tesla and who cover SpaceX. There's an Elon Inc. podcast. There are people who are clearly, following every aspect of the US government. Lots of knowledgeable people, and often the question I would ask them is, hang on, what if he questions the very premise of this question? Like, what would I say? How would I back this up? An incredibly important thing to think through as it happens when it came to the actual interview. But there was one part where I'd chosen to ask him about the impact of US aid cuts on the HIV/AIDS response globally. And in the interview, he said to me, what I was putting to him is that the prevention of HIV/AIDS around the world has been very, very seriously affected. And I knew that because I checked it 3 times on the UNAIDS website. I checked and double-checked and triple-checked my figures. So when he said to me, that is false, move on, I knew that I could stick to what I had said seconds before. I knew that because I could see the UNAIDS website in front of me, and I knew I'd gone straight to the source. Now, had I got that from ChatGPT, I could have ended up in a panic thinking, what was the source of that particular line? So I do think that, especially in the high-stakes encounters, but I would say in everything, like going to the actual source is non-negotiable. At some point, if you haven't done that, you will fall apart, and you really don't want that to happen.
A question here on a slightly different tone, relating back to what's happening in the perception of mainstream media. How can the media work together at this time when mainstream media is under attack or being made irrelevant?
Yeah, I think this is incredibly important, and I suspect for most of you, our relationships as individuals and organizations have changed in the last 5 years, have changed since we heard that term fake news and many variations of it. And I would say that solidarity is really important. That's not to say that each editor in this room, each manager, each leader of an organization is always going to sign every letter, but I hope that everyone thinks really hard about giving as much support as they possibly can, because one day you're going to need that support. And so I really do believe that, you know, however much you can give to others, you will one day reap the benefits of that. It's not the reason you do it in the first place. It's because it's usually the right thing to do. But to think ever harder about those moments when you can offer that support out of choice. You know, they're not coming for you, but you can be there for another organization or a fellow journalist.
Another great question here. I think this Slido really works because people don't like to do in-person questions.
Or do you think it's just a very good informed audience
No,
here in this room who ask questions?
People are
for a
shy
living?
to raise their hands, but they're not shy to type out questions. How can you demonstrate transparency when audiences today have extreme views on either this or that? You know, they believe what they believe, and algorithms continue to feed them the same bubble content.
No, of course you can't always. You could put the total evidence, you know, in front of someone. You could back up everything you say, and someone is still going to say, "I just don't believe you," or "You made that up," or, you know, of course. But that can't stop us. That, you know, the world can be a very nasty place, but it can't really stop us, like, you know, sticking to our core values. So however hard it is, and however many times people end up in very. Of course, journalists are paying for their trade in some places with their lives. Most of us, I think, will never be in that position. But I think the only answer is our values. Otherwise, we have nothing.
Very true. Here's a question which will relate to our first award. Do you have any comment on AI developments and implications for female journalists and stories on gender equality, as well as impact for women and girls all over? And what actions can we each take?
Well, of course, female journalists are much more likely still to be attacked on the basis of being women and for their appearance and for the pitch of their voice and numerous other things. I think it's harder for younger female journalists. I would say, you know, us older women, we have to be there for them. I also think our younger sisters teach us so much because they are not prepared to take the shit that, you know, some of us had early on and that still exists. So again, I think the answer is solidarity and human decency.
Thank you. And I think that really goes to the human part, which no AI can really replicate. So, Mishal, thank you so much for your address and for answering the questions. Can we have a round of applause for Mishal, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, SOPA Committee. Thank you all for being here. And let's carry on doing great work right around the region. Thank you.
And I'm going to stay on stage, Mishal. We have a little gift for you, so please stay on stage. And I'd like to invite Christopher Ellis, who is the co-chair of the SOPA board, to present Mishal with a little token of appreciation from SOPA.